I wonder what you thought of Joe Biden's address today and the tone that he struck in Normandy. How did he do?
I thought it was exactly what the world needed to hear from a United States president. And I say that because I think in the past few months, maybe the last couple of years, I think people in Europe have become somewhat apprehensive about the United States. I'm a member of the Helsinki Commission, and we were in Vienna, and a woman walked up to me in our control center in the hotel where we were staying. And after a moment of nervousness, she walked over and she said, please tell me that the United States is going to be all right. And that's the exact statement that she made, or the question she raised. And I realized at that moment that the world is nervous over what could happen in the United States based on the upcoming election. So the president had to pay honor to the over 9,000 United States men and women, mainly men, who died in that invasion. But he also had to assure world leaders, particularly in the western part of Europe, that the United States is still there, that we're not going anywhere, that we're not going to abandon our friends, and that we are going to continue to push the Ukraine to the center of our support. And hopefully their soldiers will be able to fight and hold off the Russian army, which I think they can defeat if we do our part.
I'm glad you mentioned the Helsinki Commission, also known as the Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe. Congressman, Joe Biden is having conversations on this trip with our NATO allies, with our European allies more specifically, and will again at the G7 next week. How important will be these face-to-face meetings with our European allies when it comes to two hot wars that are underway now, Ukraine and in Israel?
Well, first of all, I think the president has to convince the other leaders that the United States is not going to back away on any of our commitments to them, that we will not in any way give up on a free world. We're not going to give up on a democratic world. And we certainly are not going to cede any ground to Russia or any of the other tyrant-headed nations around the world, whether it's China, Russia, Iran, and we are going to be there for them as we have been. We can't just wipe out the last 80 years and say, you're on your own. The president has been gently pushing for Europeans to increase their spending on defense, but he's not saying, if you don't do what we want you to do, we're gone.
Mm-hmm. I spoke earlier today about the prospect, I mentioned Israel, sir, of a ceasefire. We talked about it with former Congresswoman Jane Harman, who you know well, now the chair of the National Defense Strategy Commission. Here's what she had to say about this potential deal that the president shared with us last week.
I think the U.S. is trying to lead. I think the deal is a good deal. I don't know whether Biden mentioned it too soon or not.
Congressman, I don't know if you're hearing anything about this. It seems to be on again, off again. This is almost a week ago now, and we do not have a breakthrough. But there's an invitation for Benjamin Netanyahu to speak before your House of Representatives. The Speaker himself, Mike Johnson, has made that clear. And I wonder if you would think that should happen in lieu of a ceasefire, or if a ceasefire should be a condition for that speech.
Well, I do have some mixed feelings about the issuance of an invitation to Mr. Netanyahu to come to Washington for a couple of reasons. One, he insulted the President of the United States when last he received a visit, received an invitation, President Barack Obama. He spoke ill of him, and then I think his conduct in the war has been abominable. I think he's, leading Israel into a situation where they're going to do two things, and both of them are horrible. One of them is that they are going to create a great deal of world sympathy for the people of Palestine, which might then give Hamas and other terrorist groups, the signal that the United States, is going to back Israel no matter what they do, no matter what atrocities they are committing, or at least being accused of committing. And so I'm apprehensive. The last time he came, many of the members of Congress did not attend. People walked out in some cases, and some that just decided that having Mr. Netanyahu there was just a bit much for them. The man is having difficulty trying to keep his own job in his own country, and I'm not sure the reason we're inviting him here, but I'm not. It may not be a good idea unless he's coming here and he's going to sit down with Biden, and they're going to end up agreeing on some kind of terms that would allow a withdrawal, including the people of Israel who were kidnapped by the gang known as Hamas.
Would you attend that speech?
I'm struggling with it right now, to be honest with you. I shouldn't, give you any lie and say, oh, of course I'll be there. I'm struggling right now on whether or not to be there. And being opposed to Netanyahu has nothing to do with my attitude toward Israel. It's an individual who I think is going to create a really hostile atmosphere in that neighborhood in which we expect Israel to survive. Because all of those kids who are watching their uncles and cousins and fathers get killed, and mothers and little babies, they're going to grow up to be terrorists. I mean, they're going to want revenge. And we need to have a peaceful Middle East, to have a peaceful world. If we have a peace in the Middle East, it means we're less likely to get into a conflict with Iran. If we have peace in the Middle East, I think we don't have to worry about China coming in and influencing the direction of some of the terrorist organizations. I think we'll see a decline. So it's important that the dialogue between Israel and the United States occurs. I just wish we had somebody else with whom we could work.
Well, you're speaking for a lot of progressives right now, Congressman, a lot of lawmakers here in Washington, whether it's in the CBC or the Progressive Democratic Caucus. You're speaking for a lot of voters who we're told, and we've seen this borne out in polling, that this issue is corrosive for Joe Biden's campaign. And I wonder your thoughts on this pushback that we're seeing from within his own party. Would a ceasefire be enough to end that?
Well, I think the president from day one has wanted a ceasefire, but he wanted the ceasefire to be done with some level of dignity, and that is that the hostages are returned, Hamas retreats, and understand that there is a keep out sign posted by the United States and its allies at the border between the Palestinian territory and Israel. That we're going to defend Israel. We're going to continue to contribute to the Iron Dome. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that Israel can protect itself. And I think that the president understands the situation he's in. I mean, it's a horrible situation because I know he's a longtime supporter of Israel, as am I. But when he sees what's going on in the United States, more and more young people are saying that they don't want to support Israel. Now, I say to my own children and other young people here in my congressional district in Missouri that look, this is not the people of Israel. The people of Israel are peaceful, loving people who are fighting for their very existence. But they're up against some devilish, demonic people in Hamas, and so they got to fight back. But man, he's in. It's a no-win situation for him because he realizes he got to be tough on Netanyahu, while at the same time not giving a signal that we're going to back away from Israel.
Well, it's just one point of weakness that he's feeling, though, with voters of color, whether it's black voters, whether it's Hispanic voters upset with what he's done recently in the case of the border, Congressman. When it comes to promises kept, whether you're talking to the African-American community, the Arab community. I spoke about a month ago with Bernice King, the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., CEO of the King Center, about this. Here's what she told us about the Biden campaign's efforts recently to attract black voters. We'll have you respond.
The campaign can't speak. The people who have benefited from the administration, should I say, need to be speaking. Let me show you how this has impacted my life. The people who believe in what he's done as the president need to be speaking for him while he is the candidate and saying this is what he's done for our communities, our group.
She talked about the consistency of being present, Congressman. What does Joe Biden need to hear tonight about that?
Well, Reverend King, I know her, and I've been involved with the organization her father founded most of my adult life. I think she is right. I think, first of all, we are trying, many of us who are in Congress and who are around the president, to do everything we can to give him information and some advice, frankly, on how to deal with the black vote and its apparent softness and move toward voting for a president. I'm concerned about it. I do think in the end, African Americans are going to come home and vote for Joe Biden. I don't think, on the election day, we're going to see a long line of African Americans voting for former President Donald Trump. I just don't see that coming. Joe Biden has a lifelong history with African Americans. He is well liked. And frankly, when you look at the HBCU issue, when you look at the infrastructure bills and so forth, the president has already given, and he's doing for African Americans, and he's doing for all Americans. So we're benefiting. We just got to get that message out. It's difficult to do because there's no central place to get the information anymore.
Well, there's the message to the president and the message to voters. Lastly, Congressman, I only have a minute left. What advice would you give him? You suggested that you're already doing so.
Well, what we've got to do, we've got to get young people going. And the way to do that is get some young people in the campaign in significant positions. I'm even thinking that we ought to get some rappers, hip-hop artists who are known around the country and put them out front. I think they can attract not just African Americans, I think they can attract young people. The young people more and more in this country now looking at race. So I think they can play a big role in bringing people aboard.